Okay, so this is a WWE pay-per-view rewind for 1993, and it's a very transitional period for the WWE, probably the most transitional time that the company had in the 90s, which just trying to restructure and revamp the whole roster. I did want to make this point before we got into 93. I think 1992 is, and I can't even blame myself for doing it, like severely overrated. It really is. I think the reason it's overrated is because you see Flair winning the Rumble in that star-studded, Rumble match. And, people love to talk about, Flair's. It was the only year that Flair was there. So when people think of 92, they think of Flair. So you automatically think it was a good year because, Flair was, replacing Hogan as the champion. And then as the year goes on, you see Bret, deliver the classic at SummerSlam, and then Bret wins the title by the end of the year, and then you think, oh wow, they're moving in a new direction. The wrestling was better. I think the wrestling was better in the main event scene, but I think 1992, it was a disastrous what happened. I mean, if you probably asked Vince himself, he would probably tell you that 1992 was like his worst nightmare, because of what happened with Hogan and the steroid comment and the government cracking down. You could just see the roster just evaporated. I mean, yeah, the 1992 Royal Rumble, from 1 to 30, that might be the most talented Rumble ever. But look at all the names that left, from Jake the Snake to Bulldog to Warrior to Sid to you name it, anybody. Even Savage kind of deteriorated as the year went on. I mean, it's just a lot of names. Just the roster just needed to be revamped, and it was very, very thin by the time you get to Survivor Series 1992. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I wouldn't say 93 is all negative, though. It probably is one of my least favorite years in wrestling. As a kid, I don't remember watching much at all. I remember renting Wrestlemania 9 when it came out in June, and just not being interested in the product at all. It got so bad that somebody actually invited me to go to WrestleMania 20 for their birthday, and I actually said no. I just was not interested in this 1993, 1994 era of when Monday Night Raw first started. This is when Raw finally jumped off the ground. And I think, looking back on it, I think there's a lot of good things to look back on with the initial stages of Raw back in 93. I mean, one of the highlights for me was, 1, 2, 3 Kid, pitting Razor Ramon, stuff like that. Even though Doink the Clown was kind of a cheesy, childish gimmick, I think the guy was actually a good wrestler. I think there was a lot of, guys that had cheesy gimmicks, but were pretty good wrestlers. Guys like Bam Bam Bigelow, guys like Tatanka, Undertaker was getting over as hell as the year went on in 93, even though he had some terrible opponents like the Giant Gonzalez, and he had just worked with Kamala at the end of 92. So, let's start off with Shawn Michaels and Marty Janetty, though. The reason I skipped talking about it in 92 is because Marty actually sold the injury for the whole year. It kind of reminds me of like the Sandman in ECW when he was selling the fact that he was blind. So Marty Janetty, he didn't return until, probably before the Royal Rumble of 1993, where he had the showdown match with Shawn Michaels. So here's my one gripe with this. I mean, if you're going to have Marty sell that injury for that long, why not just wait until WrestleMania? They had Shawn Michaels face Tatanka at WrestleMania, which was okay, but, I think it could have been so much better if they had promoted, Shawn Michaels versus Marty Jannetty. Marty Jannetty gets his revenge at WrestleMania. I think that could have been huge, but Marty Jannetty wasn't even on WrestleMania. So we had this Royal Rumble match, which was pretty average. At the time, like, Sensational Queen Sherry was, like, split between Marty and Shawn, and then Shawn actually dumped her at the end of the match. It wasn't Marty and Shawn's best match. Good stuff between these two guys. To give these two guys credit, as the year went on, their matches got better. They had 2 classics on Monday Night Raw. They had one in May when Marty won the Intercontinental Championship, and then in July, Diesel, Kevin Nash debuted with Shawn and helped Shawn win back the Intercontinental Championship on Raw, which the match was actually voted Match of the Year in PWI Magazine, the Intercontinental Championship match between Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels. So, this was actually voted the Match of the Year. I wasn't crazy about the Marty and Shawn matches. To me, Shawn Michaels in 1993 wasn't great. There was something lacking about Shawn Michaels. He was still missing a lot from a conditioning standpoint, and I would say that his mic skills were probably the best they ever were in '93. I think that's the one thing from '93 that Shawn really had going for him. His stuff on the microphone, he got really comfortable. He got a lot of mic time on Monday Night Raw with the IC Championship. I think Diesel gave him a lot of confidence too. I thought that it kind of made him feel like the man. But Shawn didn't have a great year in the ring. I thought the match of Mr. Perfect at SummerSlam was, one of the most disappointing SummerSlam matches of all time. Even Shawn said in his book, you got Shawn Michaels, Mr. Perfect, two great wrestlers. This is a case where two great wrestlers don't always produce a great match, and that's what happened there. So, an up and down year for Shawn. He kind of got started gaining a lot of weight. If you see the cage match he had with Marty at the end of '93, he looked a little chubby. He had like love handles, a little bit of a gut. Shawn even admitted that he was fat. I believe he said that one of the problems was he was spending way too much time with Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash is a big guy. He's like 7 feet, almost 300 pounds. So he was just spending a lot of time with him, trying to match him meal for meal. And he was just, drinking too much, eating too much carbohydrates. And he started to put on weight. And Vince was actually, he said in his book, Vince was really pissed about it. And then he really got pissed off when, I think Shawn failed the steroid test at the end of '93. So they stripped him of the Intercontinental Championship, but I think Shawn refused to give up the belt. So yeah, I believe he had like two, from '93 going into '94, as we'll see, we had two Intercontinental champions with Shawn and Razor, and then they would settle that in the ladder match. But that was Shawn Michaels in 1993. It's, not one of his better years. He would just become a much better athlete as he took his body and conditioning a lot more seriously. Heading into 1994, we would see the transformation of Shawn Michaels. But, the greatest thing about 1993 and for me was Bret Hart. This was definitely one of the best years in Bret's career, maybe one of the best years anyone's had in the history of the business. Just some of the work that Bret Hart did in '93, even though he didn't have a great quality of opponents to work with, because I think a lot of the better workers on the roster were babyfaces, so he didn't get a chance to work with a lot of those guys. But still, Bret was... I think by that point of '93, Bret probably put on the performance of a lifetime and probably the greatest pay-per-view of all time, one of the best pay-per-views of all time with King of the Ring 1993. So Bret Hart entered the year as the champion. He successfully defended against Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble, which was a good match. They were going for more of a storytelling match, of Razor playing the heel, and it didn't really work to its full effect. I really feel like Razor was a little green at that time. I think Razor Ramon, Scott Hall got better as the year went on, but whenever Bret was on the offensive end, he just pulled out some magic tricks like backslides, the setup for the sharpshooter, some of the reversals, small packages. He really carried Razor Ramon to a solid match at the Royal Rumble. Excuse me. The Royal Rumble match was good, but it's weird because a lot of people say this is one of Bret's best top 25 matches in the WWE. So, and still, it's not really that great. I wouldn't even say hits the 4-star level. But my point is, if this is one of Bret Hart's best matches, then I just don't think he had a lot of great opponents to work with. I just don't think he did. From 92 to 95, it just, the roster was still very, very thin as far as, the amount of heels he was able to work with. But, the Bret Hart and Razor Ramon match from the Rumble, still good stuff, still worth checking out. So he goes from the Rumble to, main eventing, WrestleMania against Yokozuna. They didn't really show a lot of the build up here. With Bret Hart and Yokozuna, but Yokozuna won the Royal Rumble. Lastly, he eliminated Macho Man Randy Savage. Savage actually going for like a pin, and then Yoko just kind of just threw him out of the ring when Savage was trying to pin him. It looked pretty cool. The funny thing about Yokozuna is he gained weight for every pay-per-view. Seriously, the dude looked like he put on at least 50 to 100 pounds for every pay-per-view, and by the time you get to Survivor Series, he looked huge. But I think he was a good worker, Yokozuna, really, really good worker. And looking back on it, people kind of bitch about, oh, the WrestleMania 9 main event should have been Bret versus Savage, or it should have been Bret versus, even Bret versus Undertaker, or Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect. That would have been cool. But I think at that time, I think Yokozuna was probably the right choice. I mean, Jericho has said this. A lot of guys have said it. All Samoans or even Roman Reigns, I feel like he's a good worker. All the Samoan guys are usually really tough, really hard, good workers. And the funny thing about this is Yokozuna is actually portraying a Japanese guy. He's got Mr. Fuji with him. And I'll tell you, only Vince McMahon would do this. Because you could have, if you really wanted to push a Japanese monster, I'm sure there was plenty of guys in Japan at the time that he could have taken. But I've always heard it that Vince is really kind of lukewarm on, Japanese talent, because they don't really, resonate with the style that Vince wants. So he basically takes a Samoan guy and has him play a Japanese guy. I'd say like only Vince would do that. But that's kind of a funny side note. But the Bret Hart and Yokozuna thing at WrestleMania, I'll talk more about it later. But I think this could have been an amazing match. I really think if they had gotten more time with a proper finish, this could have been a really, really good, solid WrestleMania main event instead of the nightmare that it became. But I want to continue talking about Bret Hart before I get to the Bret Hart, Hulk Hogan, Yokozuna situation. When we get to King of the Ring, I just think Bret was so pissed at what happened. He even said it in his documentary. He was really upset, and it's tough in professional wrestling because you don't always get the chance to really, show what you can do and really, take all your aggression out in the ring, because you never know how much time you're going to get. But Bret got the time at King of the Ring. He was able to have 3 matches with 3 different opponents, and every single one of these matches is, a top 10 match of the year for 1993. I thought the match of the opener with Razor Ramon was excellent. It probably didn't get the time that the Royal Rumble got, so it didn't really have the chance to tell as much of a story as the Rumble, but you could tell that Razor improved a lot since then, and this was just a hot, fun opener. A lot of small packages, near falls, just had the crowd on the edge of their seat. The Bret Hart Razor Ramon opening match. This might be one of the most underrated matches I think I've ever seen from Bret Hart, without a doubt. And then we have the match of the year with Mr. Perfect. They kind of their promo before the match, they touched on the SummerSlam '91 match when Bret beat Perfect. So really competitive stuff. You got 2 great wrestlers going at it. I would say that the SummerSlam match, it's more memorable, and it's they laid out more of a story, and it has the amazing finish with Bret celebrating with Stu and his mother. But I don't know, there's something about this King of the Ring '93 match with Perfect that I just really love. I just think the wrestling is a little bit more crisp. It just feels so technical. I love that finish with the reversal of the small package. So and Bret's counters to the Perfect Plex were incredible. So yeah, without a doubt, man, Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect, both those guys should be proud. I mean, how many guys have had matches of the year? But to me, this is the match of the year for '93, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people agree, even though Shawn and Marty won in the magazine. But how many people can say that they had the match of the year in 2 different years? And Bret and Perfect did it for '91 and '93. And then after Bret won King of the Ring, he had an amazing finish with Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event of the King of the Ring finals. I think Bam Bam was an underrated worker. All of Bret and Bam Bam's matches were incredible. They wrestled a lot in '93. And this one here was, even though they restarted the match, I was cool with it. I just thought it had that David versus Goliath feel. I thought Bret countered some of Bam Bam's power moves beautifully here. I thought the roll-up finish was just incredible. I think Bret Hart proved to everybody that he was the best in the world, or at least the best in the United States on that day in 1993 when he beat Bam Bam Bigelow. And then when they did the King of the Ring coronation, Jerry Lawler came out, and I gotta say, I'm not the biggest Jerry Lawler fan, especially in the ring, and even his commentary over the last dozens of years, it hasn't been my cup of tea. But I would say that in '93, Jerry Lawler was a killer heel. He was amazing. I mean, he could get heat anywhere, even when guys, even when a lot of the heels stopped getting heat. Jerry Lawler, he kind of took it, a couple steps too far. Particularly a lot of the stuff that he spit at, Bret Hart's parents. I was like, wow, he's kind of crossing the line, but he got some great heat. And so Bret kind of finished off the year at Survivor Series, teaming up with his brothers to take on Shawn Michaels and the Shawn Michaels Knights. This whole thing, I think, was just orchestrated to get the Owen and Bret stuff going. You could definitely tell Owen had a lot of natural talent playing a heel, and I think Vince saw it. I think a lot of people saw it. So they actually had, Bret Hart's team actually won the match, but Bret actually made an accidental mistake and ended up costing Owen Hart to get pinned by Shawn Michaels, and Owen Hart threw a fit outside of the ring. And so you could definitely see dissension and tension building up between Bret and Owen at the end of '93. And, setting up for their big feud heading into 1994, which was classic. And look out for that Owen Hart DVD. I just heard that it's coming out. I think it's called Heart of Gold. So look out for that. But yeah, man, Bret Hart in 1993, definitely the MVP. I just wanted to run down his year really quickly. But let's get down to the truth behind the whole Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan Yokozuna fiasco right here. I don't know. I just think there was a little bit of a panic. It was the first. Well, Hulk Hogan was still at WrestleMania. He actually ended up, in a tag team match with Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and they took on Money Inc. of IRS and Ted DiBiase, which is a forgettable match. But, I don't know. I think WrestleMania was still in its infant stages. Wasn't even 10 years old yet. I guess if I was a promoter of the company, would I be a little bit concerned of how the ending would come off? Especially with putting two new guys in the main event that are kind of foreign to the main event scene. I'd be a little bit skeptical of it, but I think, in retrospect, I think it was the wrong decision. I think it was a cheesy decision. I think it was a decision that turned a lot of people off, even some kids, including myself. So, I don't know. It's really a touchy thing to think about, but people say Yokozuna got screwed, Bret got screwed. I think they both got screwed. I really do. I just think this could have been an incredible main event. You had two legit workers going out there, and they only got about 10 minutes. Mr. Fuji threw salt in Bret's eyes, cost Bret the title, and then Bret told Hogan to challenge for the belt, and then Hogan beats Yokozuna. He basically squashes Yokozuna in about 5 seconds and wins the championship. Now, the Hogan says that he had never said to Bret Hart that he wanted to work with him or agreed to work with him. He said from the start that he was going to drop the title to Yokozuna at King of the Ring. If you see Bret Hart's side of the story, he said that Hogan and Vince and himself had shot a promotional thing for SummerSlam where Hogan and Bret were doing like a tug of war with the title for SummerSlam. So they had already started the promotion of it, and then all of a sudden Hogan said at the last second, "No, brother, I'm not going to drop the belt to you. I told Vince I'm dropping it to Yokozuna, and then I'm out." So Bret's kind of carried a little bit of bitterness towards Hogan. He still thinks Hogan's a phony piece of shit today. He doesn't have the kindest things to say about him. So even in WCW, Bret and Hogan never really saw eye to eye, especially looking back on it when a lot of people kind of ratted Hogan out as to say that Hogan kind of sabotaged Bret Hart's career in WCW. Some people would say that, and Bret Hart believes that. But yeah, I don't know. It would have been cool to see Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan, but at that point, I think it was just best for Hogan just to get out and leave. I just think his act had just gone stale. So that's what it was. I know some people were really kind of look back at that WrestleMania with the dark cloud. And I think it is. I think WrestleMania 9 is the worst WrestleMania of all time. Even though the match quality sucked, even if you didn't think it was as bad as some of the other WrestleManias, I think that whole fiasco kind of puts it over the top. And you could kind of solidify it as the worst WrestleMania of all time. So the backup plan was to push Lex. Well, I don't know if this was really the backup plan, but Lex Luger started out as a heel, as the narcissist, and I thought the gimmick was pretty terrible at first. I don't think he was getting any heat. His matches got poor reactions. Something just wasn't working. Then they did this situation at the Intrepid in New York City where I don't even know exactly what it was, but Lex Luger body slammed Yokozuna and turned babyface. And then they started this whole movement with United States versus Japan, how, Lex Luger would be like the new American hero. And I'll tell you, at SummerSlam, they did any and everything to get Lex Luger over. They actually had Macho Man come out and say, the new World Wrestling Federation champion, Lex Luger, and he didn't even win the belt yet. They had everyone like with waving these American flags. They just Lex Luger's attire, his theme music. I don't know. I just thought it felt very, very forced, very, very cheesy. The surprising thing to me is SummerSlam 1993 drew very, very well. I mean, if you look at the attendance, they did about 24,000 in Detroit at the Palace of Auburn Hills. That's pretty good business. I didn't know they were doing that kind of business at the time, but Luger and Yokozuna drew very well. I thought the finish to the SummerSlam match was pretty hilarious, though. I mean, it was crazy. I've never seen anything like it because they tried everything they could just to get it to work, and it came off pretty good. Because like if this had happened now, like people would throw a fit. But Yoko actually beat Yokozuna by count out, and as Yokozuna gets counted out, like Luger's celebrating like he won the belt. Like people come down, the Steiners, Tatanka, they hoist him over their head and acting like Lex Luger won the belt or is the king of the world, and the fans reacted pretty well to it too. I don't know. I guess they just wanted to, I think obviously they were building for WrestleMania 10 for Luger to get the shot at Yokozuna again at WrestleMania 10 to set up the rematch. And I think they wanted to kind of enforce that, just beating Yokozuna by count out is a cause for celebration. I guess that's what they were going for. But just looking back on it, after all we've sat through over the last, whatever years, it's just, it was just a little funny. It's funny, but yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about as far as the actual storylines go. I'm going to run down the pay-per-views really quickly. The Royal Rumble 1993. Like I said, I thought Bret and Razor was a good match. Shawn and Marty was a really good match as well. So you definitely had a good undercard. I thought the Royal Rumble was horrendous, though. I think if you watch this Royal Rumble from start to finish, this is one of the weakest Rumbles of all time. The finish is pretty memorable, though, with Macho Man and Yokozuna. I believe Flair was in the Rumble, too. Flair and Bob Backlund went at it. That was pretty cool. Flair's last night on Raw, I think, was the next night where he faced Mr. Perfect in a Loser Leaves Town match, and then Flair goes back to WCW. Like I said, guys, I've heard from Bret Hart and countless other people that Vince McMahon really didn't care for pushing Ric Flair as the man. He was kind of disappointed with him and kind of gave up on him towards the end, and they parted ways. I believe Jim Herd was gone from WCW, so I think Flair saw the opportunity to go back, and he took it the first chance I think he got. So it is what it is. But that Royal Rumble sucked. I really think it's an awful Rumble with the one that Yokozuna won. And then we get to WrestleMania 9. Now, I think WrestleMania 9 is the worst WrestleMania of all time. You look at the whole card on paper, I felt like it got worse. Shawn Michaels and Tatanka ended in a DQ. It was still the match of the night, though. I mean, even though it's not a great Shawn Michaels performance, not a great match by any means, but it's weird because Shawn Michaels can still say that since WrestleMania 9, the dude has pretty much had the best WrestleMania, or the best match at every WrestleMania since WrestleMania 9. So that's cool. I think Tatanka was a good worker too. He was really thick, really jacked. He could move. I think he moved really, really well. I thought he was a really roughneck, stiff wrestler. I think he would have fit in really good in Japan as well. I don't know if he ever wrestled over there, but I think he could have adjusted to that style. So, yeah, Shawn Michaels and Tatanka was definitely the best match from WrestleMania 9. The Steiners match was good, but then the card just kind of fell off a cliff. The Doink match was kind of, I think it was Doink and Crush. That was kind of embarrassing. Undertaker and Giant Gonzalez, some of the worst matches I've ever seen. The Giant Gonzalez, they tried to turn him babyface. I think it was at SummerSlam, and it just, there was just no reaction when he turned on Harvey Whippleman, his manager. But, yeah, I'm trying to think back to WrestleMania 9. Mr. Perfect and Lex Luger sounded good. See, I think Luger is a good wrestler. I think if you put him in there with someone like Flair, or, maybe if even Michaels had the chance to work with him, I think Luger could have some great matches. But in this run here in 93, I've just heard very, very negative things about him, how Luger was lazy, didn't want to be on the road. I heard Chris Benoit say things like he was really only in it for the money, guys that were really only in it for the pension, guys like Lex Luger. So I've heard negative things about him, but I do think that the guy can work, but I just think WWE gave him two crappy gimmicks, the narcissist and the real American thing. I think, the guy was in incredible shape, and it's funny because I don't think he was taking steroids here, but somehow he was able to kind of sculpt his body and keep it in incredible shape, but no one was allowed to use steroids at that time, but somehow, some way, he's still, his physique still looks strong enough to market him like he was a Hulk Hogan type of caliber athlete. But like I said, guys, I think WrestleMania 9 sucked. I'm probably missing some matches from the card that I didn't talk about. But let's move on to King of the Ring 93. I would say that it's a great pay-per-view, and one guy single-handedly made that show. The rest of the card wasn't awful. I thought Tatanka and Luger was actually solid. I think some of the supporting non-tournament stuff was decent. Hulk Hogan actually dropped the belt to Yokozuna. A cameraman actually took a photograph and like a fireball went into Hogan's eyes, and then Yokozuna leg dropped him to win the belt. You had kids in the crowd that were crying. It was kind of a dark moment, kind of a sad moment to see Hogan's WWE run end in such a negative way. But I think it needed to be done. I think Hogan and WWE just needed to part ways and move on. So Yokozuna became the new champion at King of the Ring. And like I said, Bret was amazing at King of the Ring. Three of the best matches of the year in one night. I don't know if anybody's had on a mainstream wrestling pay-per-view that kind of performance with three caliber matches in one night. We saw Daniel Bryan do it at WrestleMania with wrestling 2 matches. Kurt Angle at King of the Ring 2001 was pretty remarkable with the classic with Shane McMahon, but the matches he had against Edge and Christian, I wouldn't put them on the same level as the matches that he had with these guys, Razor, Perfect, and Bam Bam Bigelow. So we get to SummerSlam. I thought SummerSlam was an okay show. I thought you had a lot of solid matches, but there was just nothing on the show that stood out. 1, 2, 3 Kid and IRS was really good, a lot of fun. Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels sounded good on paper. Probably one of the better matches of the night was the Steiners and the Heavenly Bodies. I thought the Steiners in '93 were a lot of fun to watch. I think they were probably one of the better wrestlers on the roster were the Steiner brothers. Undertaker and Giant Gonzalez was a disaster from SummerSlam. You had some good 6-man tag matches with the Smoking Guns, Tatanka. Teams, I remember there being some really, really strong tag matches, and then Lex Luger and Yokozuna. It wasn't an awful match, but it's just one of those matches that just the way it ended, it was just a little laughable. I'll just say that. And then Survivor Series. I thought Survivor Series 93 was one of the worst Survivor Series of all time. I really did. I really think it was an awful show. It's one of those shows that just made you say, God, the product just fucking sucks. After seeing this, I was just like, wow, I gotta say this is just pretty terrible. But to look back at some of the highlights from Survivor Series 93, the opener was great though. I would say that the opener is one of the most underrated Survivor Series matches of all time. You had 1, 2, 3 Kid, Marty Janetty, Razor Ramon, Macho Man Randy Savage, teaming up to take on the IRS, the Model Rick Martel, Adam Bomb. I thought Adam Bomb had a nice look, and I think it was Diesel too. Diesel was like the first one eliminated. But yeah, the sole survivors were 1, 2, 3 Kid and Marty Janetty, and they just rocked the house. That got a lot of time, and it was a great showcase for for 2 of the best young high flyers in the business at the time with Marty and 1, 2, 3 Kid. So yeah, I love that match. You had the Hart Foundation, not the Hart Foundation, but the Hart Brothers taking on Shawn Michaels and the Knights. Like I said, that was a great way to build up the Owen Hart thing. But the actual match, it kind of dragged though. The other Hart Brothers weren't really that seasoned in the ring at that point, and Shawn Michaels Knights, it was kind of I don't know, it's kind of weird. But let me talk about the main event. It was the Lex Luger's American team versus the Foreign Fanatics with Yokozuna, Crush, and the man, I believe it was the Wild Samoans in the match too, or the Samoan guys with Rikishi, and yeah. But on the babyface team, you had Lex Luger, you had the Undertaker, and the Steiners. And it was funny because they were doing everything they could to get the fans on Lex Luger's side. Like, even before the pay-per-view started, they had a shot of Lex and his family saying "Happy Thanksgiving." But without a doubt, the most over guy in the match is Undertaker, and they really set up nicely the Undertaker Yokozuna Royal Rumble match. I believe it was a casket match. So Undertaker and Yoko both got counted out. And then it came down to Lex Luger and Ludwig Vortiga? I believe that's what his name was. Lex Luger actually was the sole survivor and pinned Ludwig to win the match. It was an average match, average Survivor Series match. Not really worth going out of your way to see. I thought Survivor Series was an awful pay-per-view, but there it is. So I'll give you my top 10. MVP candidates. Number 10, I'm going to go with Tatanka. Number 9, I'm going to toss it up between 1, 2, 3 Kid and Marty Janetty as a tie. Number 8, I go with Lex Luger. Like I said, even though Lex Luger didn't do it for me as far as the gimmicks go, he did work hard, and they did try to push him. And I thought if he was in there with the right opponent, I thought he could have had some killer matches. At number 7, I'm going to go with the Steiners as a tag team. Number 6, I'm going to go with Bam Bam Bigelow, just for that King of the Ring final. I thought he looked awesome in that match, and I'm sure you have better matches throughout the year against Bret that were on house shows. Number 5, I'm going to go with Yokozuna. I thought Yoko was a great choice as champion, actually. I just wish he could have been booked better in some of his matches against Bret. Number 4, I'm going to go with Mr. Perfect. I enjoy Mr. Perfect as a babyface, even though, he did have some disappointing matches. But, yeah, anytime you put Bret and Perfect in the ring together, you always got great stuff. Number 3, I'm going to go Razor Ramon. Razor was just way too over, man. He started the year as a heel, but there was so many times that he wrestled as a heel, the fans really got behind him, so they turned him babyface. And he just did some good stuff on Raw, man. It's especially with the 1, 2, 3 Kid and eventually, as we see in 93, 94, he had some great tag matches with the Click and 1, 2, 3 Kid as well. At number 2, I'm going to go with Shawn Michaels. Like I said, Shawn had a tough time with the weight issues and the whole suspension thing, but I feel like 93 was really the time, working at the Manhattan Center with Mr. Perfect and all those guys on Raw. He really sharpened up his mic skills, really built confidence on the mic. At number 1, I'm going to go with Bret Hart, the best technical wrestler in the world at that point. Top 10 matches of the year. This is just Raw. Actually, I probably should have the Mr. Perfect and Ric Flair. If you haven't seen that match, check out Perfect and Flair from Raw, Flair's farewell match. That's probably a must-see match as well. But these were the top 10 matches of the year. Bret and Razor Ramon from King of the Ring at number 10. Number 9, Steiners and the Heavenly Bodies from SummerSlam. Number 8, Shawn Michaels and Tatanka from WrestleMania. Number 7, Shawn Michaels and Marty Janetty from the Rumble. Number 6, Bret Hart, Razor Ramon from the Rumble. Number 5, the Survivor Series opener with 1, 2, 3 Kid and Marty Janetty as the sole survivors. Number 4, Bret Hart and Bam Bam Bigelow from the King of the Ring finals. Number 3, Shawn Michaels and Marty Janetty from May of 93. Number 2, Shawn Michaels and Marty Janetty from Raw, July of 93. And number 1, Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect. Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect, King of the Ring, 1993. A semifinal match. So that's 1993 Pay-Per-View Rewind. We'll see you for 94.